My sister slept with my boyfriend. She got pregnant. Now my parents want my inheritance, and they didn't expect what I'd do next. My name is Camila Reyes. I'm 24 now, but this storm began nearly 2 years ago. At the time, I was dating Nathan, a guy I met in college. Smart, funny, thoughtful. The kind of man you picture building a future with. We were together for about a year before I decided to introduce him to my family. Now my family is complicated. Conservative, very traditional, obsessed with appearances. My parents weren't exactly warm when they met Nathan, but they weren't hostile either. Just distant, dismissive. What I didn't expect was how much my younger sister Talia would love him. Too much. Back then I thought it was harmless. I even laughed it off. I didn't know I was standing on a trapdoor. Before we go deeper, let me ask. What would you do if your own sister stole the man you loved? And smiled while doing it. Tell me where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you believe betrayal from family cuts deepest. This story isn't just about heartbreak, it's about war. And I didn't start it, but I will finish it. I met Nathan during my junior year at university. He was one of those people who just clicked with you. We bonded over late-night study sessions, black coffee, and our shared obsession with old sci-fi movies. He wasn't flashy or arrogant, just calm, attentive, and quietly funny. The kind of guy who remembered your coffee order and actually listened when you talked about your day. We started dating after a few months, and for the first time in a long time, I felt safe. After I graduated, I moved to Seattle for work. Nathan stayed in Sacramento for his software job, so we did long distance. It wasn't ideal, but we made it work. Weekend visits, FaceTime calls, long emails when the time zones felt off. He met me halfway in every sense, which is why about a year in, I decided it was time. I wanted him to meet my family. You have to understand my family is very old school. My dad, Luis, is the type who believes a woman should only date with marriage in mind. My mom, Marisol, is, let's just say she cares a little too much about what the neighbors think. They're proud, image-focused, and not exactly known for warmth. Still, I thought if Nathan sees where I come from, and they see how much he cares about me, maybe this could be real solid. So I arranged for him to visit during a long weekend. I booked his flight, even prepped him on all the do's and don'ts. Don't swear, don't interrupt, and don't talk politics with my dad. When we arrived at my parents' home, things felt stiff. My dad barely looked up from his newspaper. My mom forced a smile, polite but cold. They weren't rude, just unimpressed. But Talia. She lit up like someone flipped a switch. Talia is 2 years younger than me. She's bubbly, always online, and talks at 100 miles an hour. The kind of girl who wears crop tops to church and still gets away with it because she's the baby. At the time, she was still living at home, running her little online store. Always around, always watching. The first night Nathan was there, she kept making him laugh. Little comments, exaggerated compliments, calling him fancy boy when he tried to help with the dishes. It felt playful. I even teased her, careful sis. You're going to steal him from me. She winked and said, maybe I will. We laughed. God, I wish I hadn't laughed. I didn't see it. Not then. When you're happy, you miss the warning signs. And the thing is, Nathan seemed to enjoy my family. Even when my parents stayed distant, he tried. He asked questions about my dad's work, complimented my mom's cooking. He played card games with Sophie, our youngest sister, and even helped Talia fix her phone when it froze. I remember watching him from across the room thinking, this is it. This is what home could feel like. Looking back now, it makes me sick. He wasn't just fitting in. He was embedding himself deeper than I ever realized. And the person opening the door for him wasn't just me. It was my sister. But back then, I was too in love to see it. Too trusting, too blind. And that's exactly how they wanted me. It happened on a Saturday. I had flown into Sacramento to spend the weekend with Nathan. He picked me up from the airport like usual, kissed my forehead like always, and asked if I was hungry. We grabbed Thai food, went back to his apartment, watched a movie, just a normal night. I remember thinking, things finally feel stable. The next morning I got up early to make us breakfast. He smiled sleepily, kissed my cheek, and said he'd shower while I finished cooking. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, and buzzed again, and again. Now I'm not someone who goes through people's phones. I never have been. I believe in trust. I lived by it. But that morning, something felt off. The sound wasn't just a message, it was a pattern, a rhythm, one that felt urgent, frantic. I looked over, his screen lit up. It was Talia. I froze. Then I told myself it's nothing. She's probably asking for help with her website again, or sending him some meme. But the notification preview read, "When are we meeting again? I miss you." My heart stopped. I picked up the phone with shaking hands. I knew I shouldn't, but I did. I unlocked it. He had never hidden the passcode, and I opened the chat. There it was. All of it. Flirty texts, voice notes, pictures, the kind you don't send your sister's boyfriend. Weeks of messages, then months, jokes they made behind my back, nights they accidentally bumped into each other. A message from just last week, "I had a dream about you again. Don't make me wait too long." My stomach turned. I scrolled higher. The further back I went, the worse it got. Conversations that overlapped with moments I remembered spending with Nathan weekends. I thought he was busy with work. He wasn't busy. He was with her, with my sister. And it wasn't some one-time mistake. It was a whole secret relationship happening in parallel to mine, like a sick shadow version of what I thought I had with him. I couldn't breathe. My body went cold. I sent the screenshots to myself, then grabbed my bag and left his apartment without a word. He was still in the shower. I didn't wait for an explanation, didn't give him the chance to lie to my face. I got in my car, pulled over down the street, and screamed. Just sat there, fists against the steering wheel, sobbing like my lungs had collapsed. Then I opened the group chat with our mutual friends and dropped the screenshots. All of them. I didn't say a word, just sent the truth, and blocked him. I didn't care what they thought. I wasn't there to defend myself. I wasn't going to justify my pain. I just wanted it out because the longer I held it in, the more it burned. What broke me wasn't just the betrayal. It was who it came from. Nathan was one thing. He was just a guy. But Talia had been my best friend since childhood. We'd shared beds during thunderstorms, whispered secrets late into the night, covered for each other at school, cried together when our dog died. She wasn't just my sister. She was the person I loved most after myself. And now, she was the knife in my back. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the ceiling in my apartment, wondering how long they'd been laughing behind my back. How many moments I thought were real were just a lie. I had no answers, only silence. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had a family anymore. The next morning, I booked the first flight home. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't pack neatly. I just grabbed what I could and left. I was running on fumes, rage, heartbreak, humiliation, but mostly disbelief. I needed to look her in the eyes. When I walked through the front door of my parents' house, the first thing I saw was Talia sitting at the kitchen table like it was just another lazy Sunday. She was scrolling through her phone, eating cereal, legs tucked beneath her. She didn't even flinch when she saw me. My hands were shaking as I dropped the printed screenshots on the table in front of her. Thick, grainy paper. I wanted her to see them in ink, something she couldn't delete, couldn't spin. She looked down, then up, and shrugged. Then she said, "Yeah, I did it." "So what?" My ears rang. Our mom gasped. My dad, standing near the hallway, rushed over. I thought they'd defend her, try to calm things down, but what happened next shocked even me. My mom slapped Talia across the face, a sharp, brutal sound that echoed down the hallway. My dad pointed to the door and yelled, "Get out! You have 1 week." For a split second, I felt something close to justice, but I should have known better. 2 days later, everything flipped again. I was packing at my apartment, still numb, when my mom called. "We need to talk." I didn't want to, but something in her voice made me pause. So I went. When I walked in, Talia was there, crying, makeup smeared, hands on her stomach. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even feel. Mom rushed to her side. Dad stood silent, arms crossed, like someone had knocked the air out of him. The energy in the room changed instantly. Suddenly, Talia wasn't the villain. She was a mother, a victim, a fragile thing to protect. I watched as my mom stroked her hair, whispering that everything would be okay. That mistakes happen, and that we can't abandon her now. I stood in that room and realized I no longer existed. It wasn't about right or wrong anymore. It was about the baby, the new image, the new project. And Talia once again had center stage. When I tried to speak, when I reminded them what she did, how she betrayed me, my mom told me I was being dramatic. She's your sister. She made a mistake. You're overreacting. I felt my face flush, my hands clenched. She's pregnant with my boyfriend's child, I said slowly. And you expect me to just get over it? She needs support, Mom said coldly. You're her sister. No, not anymore. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I looked at my parents, then at Talia. Her eyes were wide and glassy, like she hadn't expected this to fall apart. Like she was the one being wronged. And I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Done begging to be seen. Done waiting to be defended. Done being anyone's afterthought. I walked out. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't slam the door. I just left. And as I drove away from that house, the one I grew up in, I knew there was no going back. For the next few weeks, I didn't speak to anyone. I blocked every number except Sophie's. She was just a kid, 11 years old and stuck in the middle of a war she never asked for. She called me once a week, usually in whispers, updating me on things like Talia's still throwing up, or Mom made arroz con pollo. It didn't taste the same without you. I missed her. But I needed space to breathe. Then one day I got a message from my cousin Andrea. We weren't that close, but she'd always been fair. Kind. She texted me out of nowhere. Did you hear about the baby shower? I blinked. Your parents are hosting it. Invited half the neighborhood. Looks like they're acting like nothing ever happened. I sat there staring at my phone for a long time. The same parents who called me overdramatic were now throwing parties like they were proud of the affair, proud of the betrayal. But Andrea wasn't done. They're telling people you abandoned the family, that Talia's trying to keep everyone together. My throat went dry. They weren't just ignoring what happened, they were rewriting it, making me the villain. I wanted to scream. I almost called my mom, ready to let every buried word explode through the phone. But something held me back. I'd done the shouting before, and it never changed anything. Instead, I stayed quiet. I let them have their fake stories and smiling pictures. But inside, I was boiling. And then came the final insult. A wedding invitation. It arrived in a pale pink envelope with gold script. Inside, a photo of Nathan and Talia smiling beneath fairy lights, holding a sonogram between them like a prize. And scribbled in my mother's handwriting, "We hope you can join us for the sake of family." I laughed out loud. Not a joyful laugh, not even a bitter one. It was the kind of laugh that comes when something inside you cracks. They really thought I'd come. That I'd smile and clap as Talia walked down the aisle in white, carrying the child she conceived with the man who used to sleep in my bed. I texted back 2 words, "Get lost." Then I blocked her again. I thought that was the last straw. But life wasn't finished testing me. 2 months later, my phone rang at midnight. It was Sophie. She was crying. And between sobs, she said the words I never expected, "Camila. Dad's gone." I froze. "What do you mean gone?" "He passed away this morning. He'd been sick for a while. They didn't tell you because Mom didn't want you to worry. Worry my father was dying, and no one told me not a call, not a letter, not a whisper." I booked a flight the next morning. This wasn't about reconciliation. It wasn't about peace. It was for Sophie. She shouldn't have to face this alone. But when I arrived, the air in that house was thick. Not with grief, with judgment. Talia was there, arms crossed. Her husband, too. My mother barely looked at me. And the first words out of her mouth, "You're just here for the inheritance, aren't you?" I didn't respond. There was no point. They didn't want me there for love. They wanted me gone for good. At the will reading, the lawyer unfolded a simple sheet of paper. His voice was calm, matter of fact. To Camila Reyes, 40% of all estate assets. Gasps. To Sophie Reyes, 30%. To Marisol Reyes, 20%. And to Talia Reyes, 10%. Silence. Then chaos. Talia's husband stood up and shouted, "This is a joke. Camila hasn't even been here." Talia called me a snake. Said I'd manipulated our father. Said I didn't deserve anything. I just sat there, still, silent. Because, for once, I didn't have to defend myself. My father already had. And though I hadn't spoken to him in months, he'd spoken for me when it mattered most. You'd think the will would have brought closure. It didn't. It brought war. The very next morning, I started getting messages from random numbers. At first, they were vague, passive-aggressive. Then they turned into direct threats. You think you won? You have no idea what's coming. You better sleep with one eye open, bitch. I forwarded every message to my lawyer. Then it escalated. I walked out to my car one afternoon and found all 4 tires slashed. All 4. I stood there in the parking lot stunned. The air was still quiet except for the slow hissing of a tire dying under my feet. I felt my knees shake. Security footage showed nothing conclusive, just a blurry figure in a hoodie. I filed a police report. They were sympathetic, but non-committal. Said they'd look into it. My lawyer was more decisive. We need to file a restraining order. I didn't want to believe it had come to this, but it had. We filed the paperwork the next morning. My hands trembled as I signed each page. I wasn't just protecting my assets anymore. I was protecting myself. That same night while staying at the hotel, I noticed a man standing near the elevators, watching me, not staring, not approaching, just present, too present. Emma, my baby sister, was staying with me that weekend. Even she noticed. Camila. That guy's been there for a while. I didn't tell her what I was thinking. I just got her safely into the room, locked the door, and called hotel security. They reviewed the footage, stepped up patrols, and advised me to stay alert. The next few days were quiet. Then came the court hearing. Talia showed up in a white blouse like she was the wronged one. Her husband, tall, arrogant, smug, acted like the whole thing was a joke. When the judge asked me to explain, I kept it factual. Calm. The threats, the vandalism, the stalking. When Talia's husband had his turn, he played victim like a pro. She's bitter, he said, jealous, trying to punish us for moving on. The judge didn't flinch. The restraining order was granted. 300 feet, no contact, enforced by law. For the first time in months, I felt air enter my lungs without dragging razor blades behind it. But peace didn't come overnight. A week later, I woke up to a new nightmare. Someone had made a website about me. A whole website. Fake stories. Edited photos from the funeral. Accusations that I manipulated my father on his deathbed. Posts calling me soulless, greedy, unfit to be part of a family. It felt surreal. And vile. I sat there in my hotel bed, the glow of the screen painting lies in my face, and just stared. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I took screenshots and sent them to my lawyer. We filed a takedown, a digital defamation claim. And still, I stayed quiet. Because by now, I understood something important. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me to explode, lash out, make mistakes. I wasn't giving them that satisfaction. Instead, I packed my bags and checked out of the hotel that same night. I didn't tell Emma where I was going, not even my cousin. I needed distance. For 2 days, I disappeared. And when I finally picked up the phone again, it was my lawyer on the line. His voice was calm, measured. We have news. What kind of news? Talia's husband was arrested. I sat down. He was caught trying to break into your old hotel room. Security had flagged him days ago. This time they caught him red-handed. My breath hitched. What was he planning to do? We don't know, but it doesn't matter anymore. He's in custody. I felt nothing. Then everything at once. Relief, disgust. A strange hollow ache that something had finally snapped in him the way it had once snapped in me. But this wasn't just over a will. This was about power, control, punishment. And I wasn't their punching bag anymore. After the arrest, everything slowed. Not in a peaceful way, but in that uneasy calm that follows a storm, the kind that makes you wonder if the wind is done or just pausing to catch its breath. I moved into a new apartment, a place no one knew about. No mail forwarding, no old furniture, no family pictures on the walls, just space. Clean, quiet, intentional. Sophie and I still talked. I kept her out of everything. She was the only part of that family I hadn't lost, and I wouldn't let the rest of them stain her. One morning, a package arrived at my new address. It was from my lawyer, inside a single envelope, cream-colored, sealed with red wax, from Dad. He'd written it months before he passed, left instructions for it to be delivered after the will was settled. I stared at it for 10 minutes, then opened it. His handwriting was familiar, strong, but tired. Camila, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I know you didn't get a chance to say goodbye, and for that I'm sorry. I watched everything fall apart, and I watched it in silence. That was my mistake. I should have stood up for you. I should have stopped the lies, but I didn't. I let your mother handle things, and I regret it more than anything. You deserved better, and I see that now. This isn't just about money, it's about respect, about truth. You earned every piece of this life, and I hope one day you'll forgive me for not protecting you when you needed it most. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there rereading it, again and again. And then I broke. Not just for him, but for the version of me that spent years trying to be the good daughter, the one who kept quiet, who made peace, who smiled through betrayal because it was easier than being called difficult. That version of me died the day I found those texts from Talia. This what came after was the woman I became. I wasn't proud of the war, but I was proud of surviving it, of not shrinking, of not backing down. Grace and her husband, yes. I still think of her by her real name, Talia, but they tried to break me. They failed. A few weeks later, my lawyer confirmed that the website had been taken down. We had a case for defamation. We could pursue it if I wanted to, but I declined, because the best revenge wasn't dragging them to court again. It was living well without them. Talia's husband was facing criminal charges, and though she tried to spin the story again, people were finally seeing through it. My silence was louder than their noise. Sophie visited me for her birthday that summer. We baked cupcakes and watched old cartoons and didn't mention the others once. She told me I don't want to end up like them, and I said then don't let them define you. Before she left, she asked me if I'd ever come home again. I looked at her, and for the first time in months, I didn't lie. No, home isn't there anymore. It's here, in this quiet, in this space I made, for me. Because here's the truth, no one tells you family can break you, and you are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to say, this isn't love. You are allowed to protect your peace even if it means losing blood ties. I didn't win everything. I lost my childhood home. I lost the people I once believed would never hurt me. But I gained something else, myself, and I'd choose her every time. If your own family turned against you, would you stay to keep the peace or walk away to keep your sanity? Let me know in the comments. Vote number 2 if you'd stand your ground. Vote number 7 if you'd disappear quietly. And don't forget to subscribe to EN Reddit Story. New stories every single day, real, raw, and unforgettable.